You're literally Frodo right now.
He's the hero ever.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Gollum's Gamers and to a new instalment of Talk of the Table, where in this series I'll be doing my very best to pick the brains of some of the very best players and minds in competitive MESBG to answer what I'm hoping are some of the burning questions that the community might have, which is why I'm joined today by a true veteran of MESBG who's possibly won over 100, yes that's right, 100 MESBG tournaments in a career that spans over 2 decades, and joins me live today, all the way from down under, in a fantastic venue, in a theatre. It's Kylie.
Hello.
From the Green Dragon podcast, which I must say in recent months has had a little bit of a resurgence. The content is truly back, I think. Have you been a driving force behind that? You know,
we've been trying. Our goal at the moment is to get 1 episode out a month. So we're having a good.
I think you're over that. I think you've done like 6 or something in the last like few months, 3-4 months. You know,
the new edition helps.
Get some
stuff in, but we're all in different stages of life. Kind of like as we said on our podcast. He has kids. Matt's looking to buy a house, and I've just recently moved to full-time work here at my theatre. As you can kind of see behind me. Not a backdrop, but I'll kind of like prove it by like swiveling the camera a little bit. We've been trying to crank out some content, just kind of do a bit of our usual dissection of army lists and stuff. So
that's it. So I will link to the Green Dragon and everything down in the description. If you're not familiar, when I first got into the game, it was what I listened to sort of learn about armies and things like that. So there's tons of really, really good content there. So do go and check them out. But links in the description. So as always, you can find us on Instagram and Spotify by following the links in the description down below. And if you do enjoy all of the MESBG content that we make, then please do remember to subscribe to us here on YouTube, as roughly 60% of everyone watching isn't actually subscribed. So please do, if you enjoy everything that we do here on the channel. So I guess to kick things off here, before we dive into SBG stuff, is there anything that comes to mind that sort of you do outside of the game that you enjoy doing that kind of people listening might not know about you? Anything in particular?
Funny you should say that. As part of the reason why I decided, hey, maybe doing this episode from work could be kind of cool. I'm big into theatre, specifically musical theatre. I've done a lot of stage shows, worked on a lot of stage shows back of house as a tech. And I've gone to see a lot of stage shows as well. So I love just the whole vibe of seeing live performance. I love seeing bands live. I love everything live. It's just got that different quality, and then just kind of listening to a re-record or watching a movie or something like that. There's just a whole other base, and it's just become a big part of my life, obviously, because I work here now. But it's just something fun. Love it. I think hopefully a lot of you from Britain and stuff can kind of get behind that too, because
let us know if anyone else is into theatre, what shows you watch. Let us know in the comments. I'm sure Kylie would be interested to hear. Do you ever go to watch shows at the theatre you work at, or do you go to other sort of places?
Not here at my theatre. It's just a bit too. It's too weird.
Everyone.
But in the city, I recently went and saw Avenue Q again. I think it's just a hilarious show. It's a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to Hadestown coming to Melbourne really soon. I am super psyched to get to see that show. I loved some of the concepts and stuff behind it, and I think it's just a really cool concept for a stage show. Looking forward to those.
Nice. Well, any theatre buffs, let us know. Kylie would love to hear from you, I'm sure. Theatre. Okay. I didn't know that about you. So today so today I thought we'd start with maybe some more recent affairs before we kind of go back to the beginning and all that sort of stuff. So you've been at the top of the Australian SBG sort of hill, the community for many, many years now. So how would you describe sort of the community over there, the way that the game is played, all that sort of thing to, people who might not really know anything about Australian SBG is, yeah.
One of the things I've kind of noticed, at least from my travels, is the Australian scene feels, at least to me, a lot more chill.
Okay.
We don't take ourselves as seriously as much. I think that's partly because we don't have as many competitive tournaments like in our calendar. Like it's like one a month, really, where we're looking at a decently sized tournament. And even then, like we kind of like operate a bit more on kind of like what you would consider like a grand slam kind of approach, where we have 3 or 4 events in the calendar year that is kind of like the events to go attend to, like our Australian Masters, right? Clash of the Titans, Battle Hardened, these kind of like big events that attract what's a lot for us is about 50, 70 players. And those are the ones that like people go all out for. And there are smaller events.
For and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, the distance between Melbourne and Sydney is like kind of like the same as what you're looking at to go from like Athens to like Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So like, we're talking pretty long commute. For us to like 100%. Get anywhere, and we don't have the luxury of being able to take a train for real cheap. It's pretty much all by flight or
flights,
crazy road trips,
all that.
Yeah. So we have a lot fewer events, and our big events are kind of like the big social gatherings. So it's where everyone like just catches up and just hangs out a bit more. Whilst the tournaments are still more competitive and stuff, it's more about like the social night on a Saturday night where everyone meets up and gets drunk. Sometimes irresponsibly, sometimes not. It honestly depends on the year. But
drink responsibly, folks.
Yes, totally. It's a lot more chill. That's not to say there isn't a competitive sphere. We definitely have our very competitive players. A lot of which came with me to Articon last year. Which we did fairly well. We came second, just behind the GBHL All Stars, which was a bit disappointing. But hey, that's what happens when you go play in someone else's house. You got to play by their rules. So.
There you go.
Yeah, we had a pretty rough trot of that, but we did. I'm super happy with them to get second, particularly because the team had never really experienced what it's like to play in Europe,
international competition. So,
yeah, because like there's so many like little things, or maybe not little, but there's so many slight differences that are between regions and stuff like that in terms of like etiquette, terrain. I mean, that always gets memed online and stuff, but it has a merit of truth to it. So it's a lot more laid back and chill. We do a lot more casual games, is what I've noticed, particularly between Oz and Europe, because when I was over doing my big tour thing, I got to spend 2 weeks just chilling around the British Isles and picking up casual games. And I think nearly every single one of my casual games was major tournament practice for my opponent for a major upcoming British event. And I'm like, do you guys just like have an event every week? And they're like, yes, we have an event every weekend, usually multiple. And I'm like, yes, this explains a lot.
There's always something coming up very shortly, like within the month. Usually there's a GBHL 100 sort of at least every month if you want to go to lots of them. So there's always something on the horizon to write a list for, or I want to practice this or try that. So yeah, there's a lot going on. It's very similar what you've said too, because I had Sean on. I think maybe I went on Sean. I think this was maybe on news before it moved over to Mountain Goat. Yeah. But we talked about sort of the Australian sort of scene and the differences between the UK. And it kind of echoed what you've said just there about sort of, it's got a bit more of a relaxed sort of vibe, but then everyone sort of comes out for the big sort of tournaments where then it's more competitive in that sense. So,
the events to go ham at are the ones that are like the big, as I said, the Grand Slam events, like the big ones, and those are the ones where people will go all out for, myself included.
Yeah, 100%. And you did mention, but back in 2023, you went on a bit of a global SBG tour, really, which was quite unique, as I think you're the only person to have had quite the level of international success that you did in such a short period of time. So I was hoping you could kind of break that down for us, everything that happened.
Yeah. So that was
a small caveat to that as well. Which country would you say, you can maybe come to this at the end, do you think that gave you the best games or the toughest games during your trip? But I'll let you.
That's going to be that. I'm going to have to think on that last
build up to that.
But I'll give you a quick rundown of like the tour. So this tour started with Articon. Articon was like the first keystone in the tour, and as I knew I had long service leave, I knew I had 6 weeks off from work. I extended it to 8 with a bit of my own savings and stuff. So I knew that I was going to be out of country for essentially 2 months.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just cram as many events in as I possibly could. So I basically looked at the tournament calendar like a year out and looked at what events were coming up in not just Britain, but where I could possibly go. And then kind of found NovaCon, which was like the US Open. Was like 3 weeks after Articon. I'm like, okay, where are we going with this? And then worked out that Australia, we have our Masters in September, which kind of keep following on. And then kind of from that, it was really easy to like string all the tournaments together. I wove in a tournament down in Worcester. I think it's Worcester. I can never pronounce it properly. Battlefly Shires. That was a lot of fun. And then also, as I said, wove in a New Zealand tournament. I finally got down to the South Island in Christchurch, and then back home to Australia. So kind of like the big thing for me across those tournaments was figuring out, one, what am I going to be able to take with me? Because when you're traveling that much, the logistics of traveling an army suddenly become very, very important. So I was looking at armies that were not necessarily small, but could compact together really well. And big shout out to Tyler. He stayed up with me like a few weeks before like I was going to leave to work out if what I wanted to take was plausible. And we figured out there was a way of getting a Bayoning army, a Assault and Lothlorien army, and an Easterling army all crammed into a single essentially GW figure case. And I was like stoked that we managed to pull it off.
Yeah.
And
the fact you traveled with an emperor is, because you're just saying, you need to find something that can, is easy to travel with. And then, the Dragon Emperor, not the big chair.
I had a converted one from a Magmadroth. I think it's called
you did. I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. So that made things a little easier because I could like disassemble it. But I was also fortunate. There's an old Malifaux figure case that was only released for 1 year at Gen Con specifically. And one of my mates picked an extra one up and sold it to me like years and years ago. And that's basically religiously become now my travel case because it's compact enough to fit into travel on luggage, and it can fit all my books and stuff on the side, and it has one tray at the bottom that's double the thickness of a standard Games Workshop tray. So that was the tray that fit the bears, the cavalry, the emperor in there, and that was like the key part that allowed me to do the move around and stuff.
Nice.
Being able to double stuff goblins into a single set, and the pipes double stacking on top of each other. It was a whole thing. It was like
system.
Had a system in place. It was full to the brim, like as perfectly as I could get it. And it was a lot of fun. And one of the things I really, really loved about the event, like the travel, was kind of not so much the learning curve, but the growth curve I had from it. So although I won the Articon Masters, I didn't do so well in the Open. And it was through the Worcester tournament and just casual games with other people in the British Isles, and then early when I got to the US, that I actually kind of properly learned how to play Easterlings to the level that I needed to play them at to win tournaments, and then went and won Nova. So it was kind of like a really kind of big eye-opening of learning all these tricks from different players from around the world, essentially, learning from Articon, because I had to play against the Dragon Emperor 4 times at Articon, which was just wild. playing it at Worcester, learning all the new tricks, finding out that Bro Gear wasn't trashed here. He's actually the most goated thing in that entire list. All these other little tricks, the little tech you can do with like acolytes and stuff, and kind of pulling all that together to eventually get the win later on down the line. And for me, kind of bringing in the experience from around the world and meshing it all together into just essentially an awesome toolbox. I don't think I'll ever be as competent at the game as I did during those 8 weeks, because
that stretch,
I think I crammed something like 100, possibly even like 110 games in those 8 weeks. It was like a game every second day, like 2 or 3 games every second day, and it was one of the highlights. One of the highlights. I don't think I've ever got that much experience in such a sort of time and pushed my playing ability to a level that, again, I don't think I'm ever going to reach again, because it was just, I mean, how do you replicate it? Like, how do you replicate that kind of intensive gamemanship?
Yeah, we haven't seen that, before in such a short period of time, to have that amount of international success, to win the Masters, to win Nova, which is the biggest tournament in the US. Is that their biggest sort of open? And then obviously
biggest kind of tied. There's also there's a tournament in Vegas that also hits like.
Is that Adepticon?
That's the one. Yeah, Adepticon that hits
like
I think 80-90 players as well.
Yeah. So and then obviously the Australian Masters. So I guess just when you're having that many reps in that shorter period of time and you're just completely locked in on playing, you sometimes get the results like that. Although I'm not sure everyone would. So definitely. A generational sort of run right there. So, but I guess take us back to the beginning. Let's go back a little bit. When did you first get into MESBG? How long have you been playing for? All that sort of stuff.
So this was an interesting question for me to really kind of think about, because I had to really try and pinpoint a date. And then I realized after trying to figure out when, I couldn't actually figure out a date or even a year where it happened. But I distinctly remember as a little munchkin walking around in a shopping center we have here in Melbourne called Chadstone, and there was a games workshop in the shopping center that sadly no longer exists, which is a shame, because it had so much revenue, because it was Chadstone's one of the biggest shopping centers in our state. Honestly, in the country, to be perfectly honest. And I remember walking past, and this was after one of my school teachers, way back when, had got me to read Lord of the Rings, because the movies were announced and stuff, and they were coming out. And she was like, "I think you'd really like this, because you've read the books of Narnia and stuff like that. I feel like this is something that you should read to improve your reading level, because you like fantasy and stuff like that." I'm like, "All right, fine, whatever. I'll read it." So I read through Lord of the Rings and fell in love. Just immediately fell in love with the entire story and everything. I loved it. And then walking past a games workshop and seeing the Mines of Moria on display just immediately caught my attention. And just seeing the banner of Lord of the Rings, and then curious, you have to walk up, see what this is about, and then just having the guy come up and go, who are you, blah, blah, I'm Kylie. It's like, okay, cool. Have you ever heard of Lord of the Rings? I'm like, yeah, I just finished reading the books. It's amazing. I've seen the movie. It's the Fellowship.
It's
great.
What you want to hear as an employee.
And it was just
I happen to be into this already.
Yeah, throw the hook, line, and sinker in. I grabbed it. I held on to it. The guy there was so kind. I did the painting thing, which at the time was because the Mines of Moria was more a display piece. The intro stuff at the time was elves and goblins and stuff like that. He essentially gave me a free sprue of all of the elves instead of just taking your take your own miniature.
Oh, that's so cool. Because basically, I used to work at a Warhammer store actually locally around here, and so I used to do those painting tutorials for kids and things like that. And it's always a Space Marine and the Stormcast from Age of Sigmar. So we'd give them a sprue and things like that, and we'd show them how to paint it and everything. So if I was working there and it was elves and goblins, that'd be super cool. If it was Lord of the Rings, that'd be way more interesting. But no, I had to do 40k stuff. But that sounds cool. I super fell in love with it. I later got after painting up all the models in the sprue, because I got the little painting kit that you could get at the time with the mini pots. Oh yeah, those little tiny ones on the
tiny little
plastic little
clear,
bar thing. Yeah.
So I painted up some models and stuff. I went back to the Chadston and had a sticky beak, and the same guy was there and was like, "Here's some goblins that you can play against." I'm like, "Oh, excellent." And yeah, basically fueled me into the hobby. And then not too long after that, the magazines came out, and that's when I got really hooked. Because they were in the news agents, there's a local news agency near me within walking distance. And suddenly, dropped my $15 pocket money. I'll take all three of the starter.
I'll take those.
And then just keep going. And then the collection started from there. I got involved with a wargaming club not too long after, another Wanting War Games Association. And it just kind of went from there.
That was it.
Just playing lots of scenarios, because I was blessed that I got to run into Jeremy from the Green Dragon. That we both started this club at about the same time. And Jeremy's big into scenarios, right? He's like all about creating scenarios, making the scenarios, doing the boards and stuff like that. And I was like privileged, basically, from when I started playing, getting to play all these awesome scenarios from the books, which was exactly what I loved and wanted. As I said, loved the books. And then on top of that, getting to play on essentially white dwarf terrain every weekend. Like it's like nice. Dream come true.
Jeremy is an amazing painter, I must say. He is super, super nice. And I think Jacob's using a lot of his models in like bat reps and things, and it's really cool to see them.
Almost exclusively. I got so much of Jeremy's stuff. Even some of the terrain at times, occasionally. There's a few videos where some of his terrain's in there as well. Jeremy is just a machine when it comes to the hobby, and it's only very, very recently where my collection is starting to actually rival Jeremy's in terms of like what's actually painted and stuff now. So
nice.
It's nice. I was glad that I had Jeremy as almost exactly a mentor that I needed when I was a snot-nosed 13, 14-year-old kid.
I think I had the magazines as well and stuff when I first got into it, but I must have been really young. We're talking 7, 8 years old, sort of when the game first came out. I did play in sort of a local gaming store, but I sort of had the magazines, but my parents would just buy them. Like I was super, super young when the film sort of came out and stuff, but I was sort of there a little bit. But you were sort of even kind of eyeing up your Lord of the Rings in the game kind of as the game was coming out. So really,
I was like fully entranced. I'm one of the few players that can actually remember what it's like to play against the first edition Balrog, and just the spookiness that was. Because like it's one of the things that I've always sometimes as I'm getting older now start to get confused a bit with the rules. Is just how much the system has changed very subtly over time and stuff like that. Even just small things like make way moves have changed very subtly as the game has gone and what you can do now. I got the shock of my life at the tournament on the weekend where you don't need to move into a model to make way. It's just you just get to do it now. And I'm just like, move. You can what now? And I was just like, mind blown. Okay, new thing for the toolbox.
You just got to readjust, I guess, like, continuously, and like you must have so many different versions of different things from years gone by, and like it could get confusing, I guess.
And I've also got like other rule systems that are very similar to Lord of the Rings in my head as well. So I play a lot of Bushido, and used to play a lot of Legends of the Old West and Legends of the High Seas, which is very, very similar to Lord of the Rings, use very similar mechanics. And oh my God, the amount of times I get rules crossed in my head of like, no, that mechanic is not for Lord of the Rings.
MSBG mode, MSBG. I only play SBG, so I only have one system to worry about, so that makes things a lot easier, and I still mess things up, so there we go. When would you say you sort of started taking competing sort of more seriously, if that ever did sort of happen? Is there a point in time that maybe you really started to see sort of improvement in your results, all that kind of thing?
There is a year for that.
Okay.
Specific year. 2014 was the year of the great explosion onto the competitive scene, because up until that point, Facebook existed, but we weren't really utilizing what Facebook could be. And none of us were using what messaging could be, and stuff like that. It was kind of really all condensed into little community blocks with wargaming clubs and stuff like that, especially because it was around the time when Games Workshop stopped doing the big major events like Conflict, Grand Tournaments, and Complete Fanatic. Those are the tournaments that GW ran here in Melbourne, Victoria. And I had this itch to play because I was becoming an adult and being able to have my own money to move around and stuff. And there wasn't enough tournaments in Melbourne to really scratch my itch. And this is with me running like 4 tournaments a year in Melbourne. And that still wasn't enough to scratch my itch. So I decided I was going to fly to Sydney for an event with a couple of my mates. And we went up there, we played in the events. I did really well, picked up a second, went back 2 weeks later, played in another event, won it. Then decided to go up to Brisbane and then played an event and won Best Army and picked up a second place. And then it snowballed from there. I was doing like one day, what we call the 1 day suicide trip, because it's absolutely suicidal to do it. It's essentially you get up at like 4 a.m. in the morning, you drive to the airport, which Tullamarine is notoriously cold and very isolated from Melbourne proper. We don't even have a train line attached to it yet. And this is like still 2025. You fly up to Sydney, you hop on the train, you drive to the Games Workshop or the local store or wherever they're doing the tournament. You play the tournament, you finish the tournament at like 6, 7, 8 p.m. You take the train back to the airport, you hop on the last flight out of Sydney, you get back to Melbourne, you drive home, and by that point, it's usually about midnight, 1 a.m., and you've just had like a 19, 20-hour day. And I think it was, when I checked my records, it was like 12 of them in a single year.
Wow.
Some of which were like, one of the crazy trips was like Melbourne to Sydney, Sydney to Brisbane, Brisbane to Adelaide, Adelaide back to Melbourne on a long weekend.
Wow.
So that was kind of the wild, crazy Wild West stuff that I was doing in 2014. And I think the wild thing about that specific year was I somehow managed to pull an award at every single tournament, which that was when the hobby became infectious to me, because I just got that bug of like wanting to play more, wanting to compete more. And as a byproduct of that, I didn't realize it at the time, but one of my friends, Josh, he was the one that created our Australian community page. And that was based off our trip to Clash of the Titans, which at the time was in February. So very early in the year. And that started the page. That started to get the communities connected and involved with each other. And a year later, I think it was, a year and a bit later, we hit 1,000 members on our page. And that was kind of like the moment that I realized with Josh that year wasn't so much about going around playing and winning tournaments. That was the year about bringing the entire Australian community together. Because that page didn't exist. We didn't have really connections between, Melbourne, Sydney, or Melbourne and Canberra and stuff like that. And for me, more than any of the tournaments, it was making these lifelong friends that I now have in essentially every state in the country. And that's always going to be way, way, way more cooler than any tournament when I'm that year.
Yeah, nice. No, and that all dates back, to 2014. So over 10 years ago. Okay. So I guess looking into sort of more specific stuff about the game. So what would you say are sort of your favorite types of models, armies to use? I guess, which leads kind of nicely into how would you describe your play style? The two can tend to go fairly hand in hand sometimes.
Well, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and at the end of the day, I don't think I have a defined play style. I have every player has their little quirks about like how they move and set up battle lines and stuff. But in terms of like armies I prefer to play or models I prefer to play, I do my favorites. Like I do love my Gulliver. I'm very sad that Gildor's not coming back into this next edition. He's being legacied. But in terms of actual armies and play styles, I now own every army in the game. It sits in a cupboard at my house, and I can fairly, I think, confidently say I don't have a preferred army.
Okay.
And sure. I think that's simply born. Yeah, I think it's born from the fact that when you get to be spoiled with having a gaming club around you that specifically plays a lot of scenarios and specifically does all these big open day events, and just does the Siege of Minas Tirith with a literal Minas Tirith that reaches the roof, that you have to remove the entire basketball net from a little church hall. Like it goes a long way to like getting you to play with a lot of different things. And you never kind of get settled in one thing, because like 1 week you might be playing fellowship scenarios, and then the next week you're suddenly, you know, running Helm's Deep. So in that regard, I never kind of led favored to an army. I think what happens instead is I become attached to an army for about a month or two. And then I kind of get a bit tired with it and a bit bored with it. And then I move on to something else.
You go back to the cupboard and you say, what's glaring
literally
at me
go
right
back to the cupboard. Because I know when I finished playing that world tour with the Easterlings, AOL, and Beornings, once I got back home, I was like relieved that I didn't have to play those 3 specific armies, because I
Defense
had
of the North can just go and sit in the cupboard.
It could just be over there. Now, I've kind of done it. And then I think I went and did a palette cleanser and like went to play Isengard and like Gondor, because they were just different.
You
like,
needed
very different. So yeah, it's just, I'm like really lucky that because I've been in the game for so long, like I've got the cores of a lot of different armies and stuff. And it's only when like new big armies suddenly come into the game where I suddenly go, oh, I don't have this army. I don't have the ability to play this army just at the snap of fingers, right? So for me, in that regard, I'm very lucky. And also, as I said, like having people like Jeremy and an entire Wargames club behind you, you tend to get a lot of hand-me-downs. A lot of my collection is from Jeremy's or John's or
years gone by,
spots and stuff, and you just hang on to them, and
you just end up with it. Over the years. Nice. So let's say you're going to a big sort of tournament, a big event, say one of the Masters or Clash or something like that. What does your preparation in, you know, the days, weeks, months even potentially before look like? Do you have practice games, list building sort of process, wherever you want to go with it?
Yeah, so I think it depends on kind of the event that I'm building up for, right? Because take this past weekend, for example, I played recently in Arc, and I was playing Iron Hills for it. But I was going specifically to try and win a painting award. I was really been pushing my painting to the limit at the moment. So I wasn't really practicing that much for it in terms of actual gameplay. I'm like more focusing on the hobby side. I'm being super secretive because I don't want anyone to see my shiny new dwarves until I'm ready to do the big unveil.
Reveal,
to do the big reveal. So in that regard, I didn't do much. And then there's some other tournaments where I'm taking like joke fun lists and I don't really do much for them. Like I took an all cloaked Shadows of Angmar list with like lots of werewolves and specters and barrow-wights and stuff, and just had a laugh and just did really well with it because it was something so far out of left field. No one knew really how to deal with it.
What to do.
And then there are other events like Articon or Australian Masters or Clash of the Titans, where I figure out a list I want to play 3 months out, and I grind that list until there's nothing but a small piece of pile of dust on the table.
Yes, remaining.
To the point where I get to the tournament and play the list, and I'm suddenly sick of playing it because I've been playing it for the past 3 months. It depends on the tournament for me. Specifically, I have what I call the playbook, which has a whole bunch of not just generic notes, but very specific notes for army lists and formations and stuff. And I do like to have a quick squeeze through that and jot down my thoughts into that list, into that book, just to kind of keep me fresh and stuff. The first like couple of pages, for instance, are all like generic tournament stuff. Like make sure I'm declaring, bringing the game into a conversation, you know, make sure I'm checking my distances and measurements, doing analysis of my opponent's army before I start of the game, trying to figure out pros and cons and stuff. So it kind of really varies depending on what my goal for a tournament is. Because each tournament is going to have a different goal, like of what you're trying to do. You know, as I said, if I'm taking a joke list, I'm there just to have fun and hang out with my mates. If I'm you know, painting, I'm being super secretive. And if I'm going all out, like I begrudgingly, I think my friends are not too fond of that, because suddenly I'm throwing Lothlorien at them for 4 or 5 weeks, and they're getting sick of being hit with Caliborn and Galadriel and +2 to wound elves. So you know,
that's a great time.
It's a bit of everything, but I think specifically for like the competitive scene, which I think is what a lot of people want to hear about, I try and experiment a lot and try and find the limits of what my army can and can't do, and what the weaknesses my army has, and how I need to play the army to cover those weaknesses.
To
I know with
avoid those.
Lothlorien, a big one that I found is I don't have a lot of mobility because can't get move 8 or cavalry anymore.
Nope.
And I don't have march, so it's trying to figure out how to move quickly with an army that's maximum move every turn is 6 inches. So it's looking for things like slingshots with Caliborn, compel out, charge, combat, get an extra turn worth of movement, and just not falling into the trap of shooting, which is such a wild thing to say of like, don't shoot with the shooting army. But hey, if you're playing Reconnoiter, you can't afford to shoot. You got to run it. So
you got to move.
Yeah, it's just finding these limits and stuff and trying and being very experimental with not just the army list, but the rules and trying to figure out these little tricks and stuff like that and doing things you wouldn't want to do in a competitive game and trying them in a casual game. Like practice is practice, right? You can try weird, crazy redeploys and try new spell combinations that you wouldn't normally get the luxury to. And that's the perfect time to do it is when you're experimenting and
try
stuff.
it out
and I think,
and see what works.
Yeah, that's how I got good at games, right? Is I played a lot of scenarios. I played a lot of different lists. I was able to cherry pick the different kind of strategies and stuff from different parts of the game and, smash them all together with a new list and figure out how to make it all work.
Yeah, nice. So is there anything that you would say sort of stands out to you as your favorite part of going to tournaments? We all spend a lot of money, you do the suicide trips. What is it that makes you do it? Is there a favorite thing that keeps you coming back?
I think for me now, as I've kind of done everything I've ever wanted to do in the hobby, right? Because I've gone to Articon, I've won the Masters, I've did my crazy world tour and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So for me now, it's more keeping the community alive, healthy, and passing on all the crazy shenanigans that is up here in my head, and trying to show a lot of the newer players that are really eager to get in the game, really being excited about the game. Big shout out to the Goats crew because I've been playing a lot with them. Particularly when we were prepping for Articon, I was crashing 4 or 5 games a week with them just to get them kind of exposed to some of the stuff that they see. And I think that for me, more than anything, is what I want from the game right now, is that community, that having fun with friends and stuff, and to the newer parts of the community, the newer people, that players that have come in, passing on what I've learned, trying to show, hey, this is what I found with this list. Why don't you run it, see if you can get the same tricks out of it, or if you can find everything new. Because I think that's another thing too, is not being so arrogant as to think that there's nothing else you can learn with the game and nothing else new you can learn with the game. I know for me, that was a big part of my 2023 trip was over the whole course of that trip and playing in these tournaments. As I said with the Dragon Emperor, learning as I go that there is way more tricks, different macros, ideas, strategies, and seeing the game not just from a smaller kind of engagement perspective, but kind of lensing out more and seeing more of the different angles, figuring out what matches up into what better. And that's where I get the most enjoyment out of the game now, is not so much playing the games, but kind of hanging out with people, hanging out with my friends, and just experiencing the community, because we're really blessed here in Australia of having just a freaking awesome community, a lot of really fun people that get me super excited and super hyped for every game. Because even though at ARC previously, this previous weekend, I had a really rough time with some of my matchups with Iron Hills, man, if I wasn't giggling and squealing like a school kid throughout the entire course of those games. I got the privilege of playing against my friend Tim. He did a converted flying Smaug. As in full wingspan
Smaug. Flying, up on horizontal.
When the pitches hit, they're phenomenal. And he did an amazing paint job. And playing Iron Hills in Reconnoiter against it, I knew I was boned. But man, I made Tim work for that win.
Makes it worthwhile.
It was just fun the whole way through. I got Smaug down to 4 wounds.
4 wounds.
One scale hit, he was going to be gone. I managed to get 19 models off the table. It was close. I nearly pulled it back. I nearly pulled the draw out of nowhere. But
nice.
it was just so much fun doing that and playing and just getting excited at the ludicrously ludicrousness
sure,
of the game.
Of
the wildness that happened, because all my games just had just these wild epic moments, like Legolas walking around essentially with a submachine gun just nuking all my dwarves. I was like, how is this guy? Why is Leggy like this now? I don't understand.
I just used Leggy and Guar here last weekend, this weekend just gone, and obviously Guar here being insanely busted at the moment, and Mounted Leggy being insanely busted, and as a combination, it was pretty good. Yeah,
I can imagine that would be pretty oppressive to play against.
It was good.
I don't have to imagine. I know. I've had to deal with that kind of stuff. Even Berserkers now. Oh my god. Yeah. My opponent passed 9 Berserker saves. He had 10 Berserkers in his list, passed 9. It was like he was 105 points up. It was insane. Of which some of them would like double 6s passes. It was like
that's some good 6s.
Watch the heroic combat on day, just going, yeah, I'll pass 2 6s. No worries.
I'll just sit there in front of you. It's fine. You stay there.
It's like what? It's like okay, sure.
Well, shout out to that guy, whoever's really good at rolling 6s there in the Australian community.
Yeah, Marcus took me for a spin that game. That was
shout out Marcus.
Yeah. Big like lots of big crazy stuff.
Yeah. So do you have anything that kind of sticks out, obviously, over all your games, all your years? It's going to be hard to pin it down, but would you say there's anything that sticks out as a very memorable in-game moment from a tournament?
Oh, I think there's so many. There's so many to choose from.
It's a tough question. I mean,
because like most people you ask this question to, they maybe have like a decade of experience in the game to pull from. I've got double that.
Yeah, too.
And I've seen a lot of different tournaments, had a lot of crazy moments. But I think the one that it's a two-parter. I know it's a bit cheating a bit, but I think for me it tells a bit of a story. So the very first Articon I went to in 2018, I had the distinct privilege of playing against Mr. J. Clare in the final.
Yep.
And
which is on YouTube, I think, for people to watch, right?
Yes, which is on YouTube. And needless to say, I kind of fumbled deployment in that game. And that's one side of the coin. That's the tails side.
Yeah.
And fumbled it super hard. I thought I was being really clever in baiting and barred to then heroic combat and Elven Blade in, and then Jay just went, "Nah, I know this game just as well as you do," and boxed it out. And I was like, "Damn, I lost this game by a millimeter in a crappy deployment." Enter the Rocky Balboa training arc, where I spent an entire year figuring out how to get my revenge, run it back in 2019, run into Jay once again in the final, and this time I felt I got him in deployment. And that for me is my favorite moment, is that going from having fumbled the previous year and getting runner-up, which, to be fair, it's still freaking amazing.
Good.
First international trip ever in my life, and I run into a runner-up. To then the next year run it back against the same opponent, and then beat him the way he beat me.
The revenge.
That felt really rewarding, not just from a gameplay perspective, but just a growth perspective as well. Because I learned a lot from that 1 year.
We had a year-long sort of gap to build up to the moment, so it's not even just a moment. It feels more than that because it spans such a long period of time. So I'm sure that was very rewarding. Yeah,
it was. It was a lot of fun. And I still to this day will unapologetically point to those two moments of this is how I screwed up. And this is how I did it better the next time.
I fixed it.
And I really love being able to point that out specifically to players because those two games were just night and day difference in terms of deployment.
Yeah, well, Jay knows what he's doing. So we hope to see Jay at some GBHL events at some point in the near future. But hopefully he's very, very busy with the new edition of MESBG. So I'm sure he is. So do you have a most memorable tournament win or wins potentially?
I think domestically, I think there's two sides to that question, because I think there's the international wins, which are just phenomenal, right? So the Masters wins will always be special to me. Being able to go 6-0 in the 2023 Masters was really impressive, and then the win against Jay as well. Also, the Nova win in the US was very special as well. And there's also been a couple of domestic wins where I like ran Dwarf Rangers back when people thought they were terrible. I managed to win a tournament with that, and also the qualifier for me to make it to the Masters, where I ran Gulliver for the first time super competitively and went, oh wow, strength 8 is amazing.
12-inch flying, that's good. Yep.
Yeah, there's quite a few tournaments to choose from, but I think at the end of the day, it's that first Masters win where it's not just the first Masters win for me, but also the first Masters win period, because it was the first time the event was ran. And that for me was a lot, because I put so much effort. I put like 5-6 months worth of training, practicing, learning the ins and outs of the list, figuring out I should be dropping 2 guys to put shields on all my orcs, all these tiny little micro adjustments, the dropping of the second Barrow-Wight, which everyone thought was mad. Why would you drop a Barrow-Wight for a captain? And then just feeling the justice come back in my games in the Masters, where the March came in clutch. So little things like I think that tournament it felt like it was the end of a training arc, and it felt like the end of, honestly, an anime movie, because I couldn't have scripted it better.
Rounding it all off in a final.
Yeah, it was. And like, I also have to kind of say as well, like, big shout out again to Matt and Jeremy, who like really went ham with me on the training. Like, they not only put up with me 5-6 of playing the same lists over and over and over, but constantly challenged the way I was thinking about the list. Because as much as I went to that tournament and did really well, which was, that's great. Everyone that helped me get there, I think, deserves just as much praise, because I couldn't have, with my brain power alone, couldn't have figured out half the stuff I did with that Angmar list as I did by myself. Like, it was a honestly felt like a bit of a team effort in that regard. And I think it can be underestimated a lot of how useful it is to have friends backing you up, helping you figure out some lists and solving some stuff because although I don't get to play with Jeremy as much these days, I do have like Tyler and Alex and stuff from Mountain Goats who I get to play with a lot, and my other friends like Matt and stuff. And we're just running the same thing, and it's just as rewarding when we figure out something new together. And
yeah, completely agree. Having people to bounce things off of, like, obviously being part of the Gollum's Gamers, we're a team of 9, currently the #1 ranked team in the GBHL, so shout out to the boys. But being able to, bounce ideas in the chat and what do you think on this and all that sort of stuff to 8 other people, who are obviously really, really talented at the game is obviously a huge, huge help to, figure things out, like you say. So friends in the community are a great thing for sure. So moving on then, so do you have any, this is a interesting question, I like this one, do you have any pre-game or in-game rituals of any sort? So take the floor.
Yes, I do. First one, the big one, I go to the toilet before every game.
Shout
and
out
I know this
to
sounds
the loo.
I know this sounds weird, but honestly, the worst feeling in the world is playing a really, really important game, or like round 5 of the tournament.
End.
Some say like the last game is the most important. No, I disagree. Round 5 is always where the hardest game happens. And let me tell you, playing a round 5 when you need to pee is the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah,
so go to the toilet is honestly
number one.
That's
tip,
number
folks.
1.
Yeah.
Number 2, as I said earlier, I look at my playbook because, as I said, I've got a couple of like little things of like remain calm, breathe, analyze, and stuff like that. Occasionally, I'll look at it during a game if I feel like I'm stuck or I'm in a losing situation. But just refreshing the basic core principles of playing competitively before a game is super, super useful. And I think very, very underrated how much your composure can impact a game, right? Because we've all had bad dice. I mean, who hasn't at this point? We've all been in those sticky situations where we've had to claw our way out of the hole because our opponents have just got this clutch move off. But hey, you got to do what you got to do. And I think, just having that moment just to calm and reset And this was a lesson I have to say I learned the hard way, incidentally at Articon as well, of just don't let your emotions and stuff overrun you and overwhelm you, because it can tear you down to your base level if you're not careful. And at the end of the day, we're not playing for sheep stations. It's a hobby, first and foremost.
We're having fun, folks.
Let's have some fun, guys. Let's have some fun while we're playing the game.
Yeah.
We want to be having fun, not just you having fun, but your opponent having fun as well.
Everyone involved.
Yeah, let's group hug kind of feels. So yeah, I think it's good. It's good to come into a game calm and fresh, and most importantly, upbeat, happy, ready to go. And just if dice happen, laugh it off.
Yeah.
I had to deal with
it is what it is.
Constantly passing 6+ saves. You know what I had to do? I just had to sit there and laugh and go, "What is with your dice, man? These things are cooked.
I need those."
And it was like one of the moments in the game where we realized the only models in his army that were doing any sort of damage or rolling well with the berserkers, and it was like, oh yeah, crossbows in combat. Yeah, it just died. Pikes in combat. Yeah, it just died. But the berserkers, you better believe they were taking on 3-on-1s and they were kicking ass. So yeah, just gotta kind of roll with the punches, you know. Just
that's it.
You know,
take it as it
comes. Let it wash over you like water on a rock.
That's it. Shout out. Okay. So moving on more to, I guess, how you approach the game and all that sort of stuff. So is there anything about either the way you play or think about MESBG potentially that allows you to be so successful? Could be a particular strength you have or something that, that's maybe overlooked by other people. Anything like that comes to mind?
I think I'm going to try and formulate an answer here. I don't think it's quite been explored a lot, but I do a lot of analytics in my head, right? So at the start of the game, I kind of look at my opponent's army, look what I got, and trying to figure out, how do I win this game? What in my list has got the advantage or the damage potential or the mechanics to actually be able to score VPs, right? So, maybe it's destroy the suppliers, and, I need my goat riders to do the work, right? They need to be the ones to open up a flank, get in on the back objective. So then it's all about, how do I make my goat riders, get into this awesome position, and kind of working backwards from the answer, I guess you think, and then kind of figuring out where's the emergency button as well, kind of figuring out some plan Bs and Cs of like, if this fails, can I pivot and stuff like that. So for me, when I'm looking at a game, I'm always looking at, how do I want to try and manufacture matchups in terms of like heroes and heroes? Like, my opponent's got a troll chieftain. I don't really have much in the way that can deal with it. But you know what? Gandalf might not be able to take the chieftain one-on-one and win in the long game. But Irolas, he has heroic defense. Maybe I can throw him into there for a few turns, call some heroics into defenses, buy some time, and then get Gandalf to put pressure somewhere else. So I'm kind of looking at the game in the sense of, where do I want my resources to go into? Where do I want them to, what do I need them to do? And what's redundant, or what extra stuff do I have? What can I pivot through? And what needs to be where? So I'm kind of looking at the game a bit more in a macros perspective, and trying to get the matchups that I want on the table, as opposed to, just kind of setting it forward and just trying to go with a generic base plan that will always work, because army lists change, your opponent changes, terrain changes, and you don't always have the luxury of going with plan A. So I think that for me is like the big one, is always looking for what your resources in your army can do, how you can apply them, and what specific resources in your army are the win conditions. What's going to win you the game? As I said, goat riders, being able to like run, hit the objective. Maybe it's a kill mission where you have to go fog of war. You have to go kill specific heroes. Like, okay, what in my army can actually
do that?
Get to that thing and kill it. It's like, oh well, I got Dane. He's probably the only option. Oh, but I suppose I have the king, so it's like trying to figure out like a pincer move where you can get Dane into that heroic combat or whatever. Or even just looking for things like a sneaky goat being able to get around the back and get a nice charge in on the back line or something like that. So looking at what can actually physically win you the game in terms of mechanics, I think is a big thing that often goes unnoticed or glossed over, because there is a misconception of how that actually works within the space of the game.
Yeah, it's you've got to get your win conditions sorted,
Yeah.
right? When you get to the table, you've got to figure out, how do I get the most amount of VPs here? You've got to analyze that, because if you can only achieve less than half of them and your opponent has more than half, then you're going to lose the game, and you've got to figure that out early doors. But then, like you say, be able to adjust throughout the game to whatever happens with dice rolling and all that sort of thing.
Because like all games basically boil down to two things, two choices. You either progress your game plan or you hinder your opponents. So this is kind of taking that idea and applying it to SBG, right? Because, sometimes you might not be able to win a game straight off VPs, but you might be able to stall your opponent enough where you might be able to open up an opportunity and stuff like that. So, looking at those kind of ideas and concepts and drawing inspiration from other areas, I think is also really important too. I think there's a lot to be learned from, how professional esports teams play like League of Legends and Counter-Strike and stuff like that, and looking at ideas from like Go and chess. I think having an idea of some of the other games and concepts and then applying them to Lord of the Rings can be very, very helpful. And I think there's a lot to be learned from other game systems and board games and stuff, and how you can draw that inspiration, those ideas, and bring them into SBG and further your gameplay.
There you go. There you go. There's lots to be learned, folks, out there.
Yes.
So what would you say is one of the biggest lessons you've learned from a game or a specific moment at a tournament? Anything that sticks out?
I think the big one, I think that always seems to come back up, right? Because it's the biggest hot topic conversation that ever exists within our community, is sportsmanship and just having fun and being, good about the game and playing in the spirits of the most gentlest hobbit, I think is the word on the street in the new book.
It's in the book. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. But everyone says it's corny, right? That it's being introduced into the book. But I think it's so, so important, because as I said earlier, we're not playing for sheep stations, right? This is not, a world final for, $1 million or anything like that. We're playing for bragging rights, and that's kind of really about it. At the end of the day, maybe a nice, neat little trophy and a handful of miniatures. But at the end of the day, is a box of miniatures really what you want to end a friendship over, or disgrace yourself in front of a community or something like that? Like, I think it's so important that we're trying to make every participant in a game have fun, right? And enjoy themselves and get it. And, for me, I love the cerebral aspects of the game. I love pitting myself against the best of the best. It's why I enjoyed my 2023 trip so much. I mean, how many people can say they got to play against the best in the world, not once, not twice, but 4 times over the course of their trip, right?
Yeah.
And I love playing that, but at the end of the day, that's going to get soured if that game isn't fun and engaging and we're both having a laugh and enjoying themselves. And I know some people get lost in the weeds and being really cerebral and stuff. I had that experience in the US, but what was really cool about the end of the game? Some of the games in the US, when my opponent was being really cerebral and deep in thought and not saying much during the game, at the end of the game, they just turned around and went, "Man, that was super fun. I enjoyed that game. I can't believe it was that close." Letting it wash away and just enjoying the game, because we're here for fun. We're here to really just, have a hobby, blow off some steam, and relax. At least for me, it's relaxing. I know that's weird to say. I find a competitive game relaxing, but hey, I do. This is what I do on my Friday nights. So every Friday night I'm off at a gaming meetup and having a drink, downing some chips and dip, because Henry always brings dip. And just trying new things, having fun with the game, and just losing yourself in the story that is Middle-earth, because it's one of the greatest stories that our species has come up with. And I think it's
agreed.
It's a disappointment to sour it all by
it's interesting though. You were saying, obviously when you go to a tournament, like, people play the game for different reasons, approach the game in, different ways for different reasons. And I guess it's trying to, like you say, sort of, understand that, and that your opponent may be approaching things in a slightly different way to you for the reasons you're there potentially. But that's fine. Those two things can coexist, and you can still have a great time and both have a good time playing together, even though you might not be there all of the time for the same reasons. And I think that's the really good thing about SBG and about wargaming.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we can kind of all take away from everything, because like it's a hard lesson to learn. I had to learn it in the most brutal ways possible. You wouldn't believe the kind of person I was as a snot-nosed teenager. And then as I got older, I became really arrogant and up myself. And then luckily, I've had wonderful friends that have brought me back down to earth and kind of made me realize that, we're here to have fun. You're not making this fun anymore, Kylie. Can you kind of make it fun again? Yeah. And that for me was extraordinarily humbling, right? And knowing that, the friends that have brought me out of this stump, out of this feeling like crap and making everyone else around me feel like crap, they're the ones that stood by me, backed me up, pulled me out of my worst, and made me a better person for it. So Tim, nice. Matt, if you're watching, big shout outs, because I wouldn't be here without you guys.
There you go. Love it. So at this point, you've been playing for so long, over 2 decades at this point. Are there any goals you have still within MESBG that help you carry on competing? Obviously, you touched on that, sort of the competing side maybe isn't the core thing that's keeping you in the game, but to go to tournaments like Clash and things like this, the Masters, is there any goals still for you?
I think there are still stuff I want to do within the hobby. I know I kind of said there wasn't, but kind of like sitting here thinking about it a bit more, I think there is still some stuff. One thing I really do want to do in maybe not the foreseeable future, but the future, is I want to run a big, massive international tournament here in Australia. I really want to encourage like the people from the US, New Zealand, Europe, wherever you're from. I want people to at least once in their lifetime come down to Oz and see how we kick it, right? Play in our house. Because we've been traveling over to Europe now for roughly 8 years to experience international play. Occasionally we get to hop over the pond, over the Tasman, and go get to play in Kiwi lands, but that's not as regular as we would like it. So one of the goals I would love to do is run a big international tournament here in Oz. My kind of tentative pencil plans is aiming it around the Olympics.
Okay.
To give you guys a reason to come over.
Okay.
It's not just play War Dollies. But that's probably one of the things. I'm really interested now a bit more in painting and getting my painting a bit more, maybe not at Jeremy's caliber, but approaching Jeremy's caliber.
Nice.
And there will always be events that I'll go all out for and stuff too. But I think there are the other parts of the hobby that interest me the most now, as I said, is the community development, the potential of running a really big, cool international event, and getting my painting to something that's quite respectable is something I'm really, really trying to really push and stuff, because I've been loving painting. Painting that Iron Hills army that I've done. I'll definitely throw some pics up at some point on the pages and that. But I've really enjoyed painting that army. And
so those are the things, sort of, keeping you, ticking along in the community. It's not so much the playing at this point. It's the other things surrounding the hobby, which is
because like how do you top 2023 at the end of the day? Like that
you
felt
feel
like
you tick that off.
Tick that off. Got the crown jewel. Kind of go cool. What do I do from here? I definitely want to do a European trip, like mainland Europe at some point. But my second languages are very poor.
But those guys would love to have you. Mainland Europe SBG is very, very strong. And I've
made a promise to the French that I'm going to learn French off my grandma and get down to France at some point, which will probably
You've said it a second time now.
It's
you would
out there. Think that it's like I'm learning a little bit. I've learned that merde means shit, so we're getting there. I'll let all your imaginations figure out how I learned that word. But
there you go.
So
at some point, maybe there's
it'll
a
happen
Europe trip coming up. Yeah, nice, love it. So what would you say? What is your best piece of advice for up and coming players who's aspiring to be the next Kylie, the next Green Dragon? What do you think?
I have thought long and hard about this, and again, I'm rehashing an old point. But experiment, have fun with the game, try new things, play more games. The best way to get experience is to play, to do wild, wacky things that you wouldn't normally do. See what happens when you throw Boromir up a far flank. What happens if you stack up all your heroes? What happens when you do a shooting battery? What happens if you play around this terrain feature? Like, try it and experiment and different compositions. Just play more, experiment more, and I think you'll get way more fun out of the game, and you'll learn a lot more with it too, because
for sure,
nothing beats on-hand experience, right?
Experience, yeah, no, totally agree, because it was I first sort of came back to the game during lockdown and COVID. It was when I found the Green Dragon podcast. So all of my initial learning about the game was all through listening and reading. But then obviously when I then went to go and play and actually started getting on-hands experience, it was only at that point that you start to actually learn and have those first-hand experiences for yourself. So it's all fine and good to listen and digest, but it's the actual practical application of those things and trying and testing things that then shows you what does work, what doesn't work, how can I improve on this. So you need to play games, folks.
100%. Yeah. And as I've said to many people in our community, I'm around. If you want to come hang out with me in Melbourne and play a game, you let me know, and I will definitely schedule up a game with you. For those that are international, hey, Mountain Goat Discord exists.
Shout out to the Discord.
We've done some chats and some tabletop simulator stuff there. So hey, there are people around. The only thing stopping you is you.
There you go. Nice. So one final question before we get to the rapid fire segment. We've spoken a little bit about the hobby side, but would you call yourself a hobbyist? How much time do you get to hobby? Obviously, it's maybe something you're focusing on a little bit more recently, but how much time do you get to sort of do that?
So my hobby specifically is very, how would you say, all over the place. And that's partly because I work, as we can see, in a theater, and the times when you would go to the theater are the weekend and on evenings on like a Thursday and Friday night. So my schedule is about as erratic as they can come. If you had a look at my diary right now, you would find I have a Tuesday and a Sunday free, and the next week I randomly have a Wednesday free. And that's it. Every other day I'm working and got stuff on. So
but we managed to nail her down for a podcast, guys.
We managed to make that work.
There you go.
Yeah. As I said, for me, it's just I'm a very kind of go with the flow, ad hoc kind of person. As much as I try and plan, it never ends up panning out as well as I hope. So I always just try and weave it in where I can. I'm much more of a preferring to do one or two little bits and pieces for an army. For instance, I like rounding off things like maybe missing heroes, like a random Irolas or an Ingold or something I'm missing in the Gondor army. I'll get them painted up or something in a night, and stuff like that. For bigger projects like this Iron Hills, this was like a concerted effort of all my free time in the past 3 weeks has been gone to paint this army of Iron Hills up specifically for this tournament. So it's swings and roundabouts. It's bits in there, bits over there, concerted, deadline efforts.
Are you a batch painter? Are you smash
I don't
out troops?
prefer it. I don't like it. There's a story behind it. I once painted up 96 high elves to go on top of the 40, 50 odd I had for War of the Ring. Shout out to War of the Ring back in the day.
Yes, indeed.
So I batch painted 90 elves in a single 2 day. Well, I say a single sitting. It kind of was, but it was a 2 day, 12 hour, 48 hour, whatever you want to call it, sitting, and it broke me. It completely over. I can't do batch painting now. So my entire Iron Hills army was 6 dwarves at a time. 6 dwarves at a time.
Okay.
Dwarves at a time.
Wow. I was about to complain about the fact that I'm going to have to batch paint 30 scouts over the next 2 months.
That's
But then you just said I had to do 90 elves in 48 hours. It's like,
Good
well,
luck.
that's sort of.
Good luck.
Yeah, scouts. I've never painted a single Urukai model before, so but I contrast everything. So
Yeah, that's gonna
I
save so
sort
much
of
time.
yeah. So I have some time, so it's fine. So okay, we're gonna close things out here with a quick rapid fire segment. So I'm gonna fire out some short MESBG related questions. Nothing too serious. So just whatever comes to mind, really. Just throw out there.
Go hit me.
Sound okay? Yep, sure. Okay.
Love it.
So,
Yeah.
please do let us know, folks, if there's any other questions you might like to see in the rapid fire segment. There's a couple others in there from last time. So, okay, kicking things off. 1 day or 2 day events?
2 day events, 6 games.
Love it.
Specifically 6 games.
6 games. Should you mount or not mount your heroes? That's a very broad brush there.
Yeah. Ooh, this edition, that's a tricky one. Without thinking too much about it, I'm gonna make a random thing and say over 100 points, put it on a horse. Under 100 points, leave it at home.
It's not a bad rule. Okay. Gandalf or Saruman?
Gandalf. Ooh, Saruman, except for Gandalf the White. I would take him over Saruman. I think the new Gandalf the White is actually worth the points now.
You love Gandalf the White. Shout out. Favourite character from the trilogy, in my view. So there we go. GBHL terrain or Australian terrain?
That's not even a question. You already
I
know
had
the
to
answer
put
to
it
this.
in there, Kylie.
You already know the answer to this. I'm one of the few people that can actually comment on it. Terrain all the way down, not even close.
Australian terrain. I will put the lid back on that can of worms and screw it up
very
let's
tightly.
Just put that
over there. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's over there now. Fine. Biggest tournament essential.
Ooh.
There's so many to choose from.
I got it. Priority token.
You use a priority token.
I use a priority token.
Priority tokens, Kylie.
But like evil priority on one side, good priority on the other, and you flip it. Because I put it like in the middle of the table,
in between. Okay.
Usually like on top of like an Osciliath Ruin or something like that.
Yeah, of course.
It is there every game on the table, close to the middle, because I notoriously forget. I am hopeless with remembering priority.
I do I always end up asking my opponent, "Was your prior right? Was my prior?" Yeah. So maybe I need a priority token. There you go. Biggest tournament essential. Okay. Best model in the game.
Profile or sculpt?
Both.
Okay. Profile. I would have said my boy Gulliver, but he kind of got smacked in the back of the head with a giant 2x4, making him fly 6 inches now for whatever reason. Profile, it's not even close. It's Legolas. He's just
leggy.
I mean, if any of you have heard me on the Lowlands podcast and you want to hear me go on a full tilt rant about why Legolas is hard now, go check that out.
Shout out Kevin.
In terms of shout out to Kevin. That was actually a fun episode. Anyway, sculpt. Ooh, sculpt's difficult because I got quite a few sculpts that I quite enjoy.
I wonder if you're going to go newer or new plastic kit, or if you're going back.
See, I'm an old school gal. I love the older sculpts, particularly the neutral poses of the old sculpts. And I think one of my absolute favorites is the old school Elendil. Just on foot, that just regal, neutral pose. I love them. I'm also a big fan of a lot of the pointing Helm's Deep poses with Aragorn, like he's off like doing this and stuff.
Yeah. Theoden as well, with the sword going like straight up.
Yeah, the Theoden pose, like that's
another
another absolute killer.
Nice.
Big fan of those.
Nice. Favorite model in the game?
Gulliver. I mean, it's I can't pick another model. It's just done so much for me. He's been such a fun model to play, and I know people hate on his pose, but you know what? It's grown on me. I actually quite like his pose.
Big bat, sure, it's cool, fine. Symbol dice or no symbol dice?
You know what? Get me off the symbols. Give me the pips.
Off the symbols.
I'm on the pips.
Wow.
Well, because for me,
Your pip.
I'm old. You gotta remember, like I'm like circa like noughties era. I remember when symbols were on the 1. So when they brought in symbols on the 6, it threw me. And
they still do that
just
on the GW dice. They sell the little small sort of dice in all the stores.
Yeah, and the skull's on the 1.
Yeah, it's on the 1, the skull. Yeah,
until you start using the the Inquisitorial dice and realize the skull's the 6.
Yeah.
Like what? So yeah, no. Get rid of the symbols now. I'm over it now. Just give me some nice pips.
If you are using symbol dice, though, would you prefer that symbol to be on the 1 or the 6?
Yes, on the 1. And I know that's controversial. As
on the 1,
I'm on the 1. I've got all the old dice, the old Rohan dice, the old Isengard dice, the old Khazad Doom Moria dice with the symbol on the 1.
Right.
I still sometimes get confused when I'm using dice with symbols on the 6s. Like.
That's crazy.
It throws me too much, and my head just goes, "That's a 6." In fact, I've got this funny story about where Henry played an entire tournament with the new dice, thinking the symbols were 1s, and essentially played an entire game without any 6s.
Without, because I keep rolling loads of 1s. Oh no, I just can't roll a 6. There you go. Symbols on the 1. I didn't see that coming, Kylie. That's a curveball. Tea or coffee? I'm not sure if Australians drink tea.
I like tea, but I can't drink caffeine. So I actually don't like any of the, I'm allergic to caffeine, so I don't like any of the like milk and stuff in the tea. I prefer herbal teas. So a little bit of lemongrass and ginger,
stuff like that. Yeah, okay.
Cranberry and apricot, like that kind of tea. I love herbal teas. I drink a lot of herbal tea.
I also prefer tea, so shout out there. High points or low points?
If you had asked me in the old edition, I would have said lower. But this edition, go up. Get me north of 800, because some of these lists, man, oh my god. Booklet Scouts at like 600 is just cancer. Dale is just cancer. Get me to 800 where I can even out the curve on that stuff.
Yeah. That's why I'm painting my Scouts at the moment. But there we go.
Honestly, no surprise.
There you go. Good or evil?
I think if you had asked me like 8 months ago, I would have said evil. But this edition, good. They've just got them.
They are. Yep.
Maybe it'll change with the armies of Middle Earth, and evil gets some of its quality of life back. But I mean, they took a kneecap to ring wraiths.
They did.
Murdered Gorva. They took away all your fancy monsters, all of the tech that you needed from like Goroth and all these mid-level evil heroes and
cheap heroes.
Yeah, now you're really stuck. And yeah, Balrog got some quality of life buffs, but where's everything else?
Yeah. Yeah, good at the moment is super good. There you go. Yeah. Favorite prize you've received from a tournament?
Okay, now this is going to be really weird. So many moons ago, back when I was a wee little, almost a hobbit, I'm still very tall. I went to a tournament in Adelaide, and the first place prize was the old Games Workshop released a book cover thing. So it's like a little book case for your books. So it can fit the 2 main rule books and maybe a source book in it, and it like zips up, has enough space in there for a tape measure and some dice and other stuff. And when I first got it, I went, "This for first place, really?"
Where are my models?
And then I started noticing over the years that my books, specifically my main rules book, was always in that bookcase covering with the 1 ring design on the front. And it's gone everywhere with me. Everywhere. It's just constantly been there. And I distinctly remember a conversation with Jeremy before I went to Articon, and we both took out our books, unzipped our little bookcase thing, pulled out a book and went, "Gee, we really got some mileage out of these, haven't we?" It's probably one of the best things that won in the tournament. And I went, I don't think I've ever had a damaged book since then. Yeah. And I recently went through my collection and went, yeah, I got this book when the 1 ring rulebook came out, and I got a new 1 ring rulebook with it. That one's pristine, not damaged. My old one, completely torn, bindings falling off, the front page is like all loose, there's smudges and stuff on all the pages. I'm like,
that's some staying power then.
Just this book protector case thing. Yeah.
Love it. Nice.
Weird, but...
what would you be ordering at a bar?
Probably a cider. Yeah.
Cider?
It'll be
That's
a
good
cider.
shout.
Yeah. Unless I'm driving, and then it'll be a lemon bitters.
Okay, but flavour? Any particular flavour of cider?
I'm a big fan of the Recordling ciders, specifically the strawberry and lime. That's like my go-to.
They are very, very good. Strawberry and lime cider. Nice. Can't beat it. Nice. Most underrated model?
Ooh, that one's a curveball. Underrated. Oh, but I feel like if anything I would pick would be... Actually, you know what? After having played them this weekend, Iron Hills Goat Riders.
Really?
I got a lot of use out of them.
You don't see
I took a lot of them.
Anymore.
I took 7 in my list. And they enabled me in every game. Even if they didn't do that great in some of the games, they enabled me and did some stuff. And Iron Hill Goat Riders, I actually think they're actually...
Yeah, they lose out on the movement, but there's a lot more in the profile that you get as a result.
Name me another warrior troop in the game that has strength 4 and a lance.
Yeah, and D6 and
D6
the headbutt.
And a headbutt on every 25mm model you charge.
Yeah, there's other things going for it. I agree.
You have to make them work. You have to put in some effort to like set them up and stuff for success.
Because you have less movement to work with,
but honestly, they've been pretty freaking, pun intended, goated.
There you go. Most overrated model.
Balrog. I don't see what the hype's about.
We just had Balrog Watcher come 2nd and 3rd at the Gates of Gondolin this weekend.
Watcher, okay, I understand the Watcher. It can do disgusting things, but Balrog, overrated.
Wow, even with the changes, 8-inch move.
Look, I don't know. I hear all these stories about how their new Balrog has done all these cool things, like picked up a model and whipped it in and put him behind him and picked up and thrown them and shit. Like, I've heard all the stories. I've not been able to do it in my own games. And I've played like 5 or 6 games with the new Balrog, and like my Balrog goes into it's like that meme of like my Balrog walks into combat, doesn't win a combat for like 5 turns, and then decides to kill like 2 Dale guys the entire course of a game, and then Balrog has got this massive kill count that like the Doctor
heroes and everything.
Yeah. Honestly, Balrog, it's just the whiff potential is too high.
It is. 4 dice, no might. We've seen that one play out before. In an army list, would you prefer multiple cheaper heroes or fewer expensive heroes?
Ooh. Old edition, I probably would have said the cheaper heroes. This edition, I'm feeling the bigger heroes are making more of an impact. By and large,
expensive
it's
stuff.
It's hard to call. I think it's the closest one you've given me so far. That's a coin flip. Because we've all played against Uglook Scouts, right? And they walk all over you, right? And because they're just all cheap heroes and stuff like that. But at the same time, I've also had the inverse problem where Boromir and Faramir charge at me and absolutely ruin my day.
King Elisar just running around doing whatever he wants now and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially with the changes to strike. I think honestly, I'm personally leaning just that hair like.
Over the
51-49 in favor of the big heroes, but
expensive.
I think honestly it's
you
too
can make
close
both
to
work.
call.
Yeah, sure. Frodo or Sam?
Sam. He literally carries the Fellowship. Literally, he picks Frodo up on his back and just sends it. Sam all the way. Sam is the hero of Lord of the Rings, and I will have no one tell me otherwise.
No one tell me otherwise. Our previous guest said Frodo, so it's now 1-1 from the talk of the table guests.
Go get my boy Sam up there.
We'll have to see how that continues. Yes, Merry or Pippin?
I'm never going to pick the Fool of a Took. Merry all the way.
Merry all the way. I'm also a Merry stan. Shout out Merry.
Yeah.
Favorite scenario?
Ooh.
Now, not from the 6 currently in the game.
Yeah, that's... Ooh. This is probably the hardest question you've given me so far.
You could give an honourable mention if you wanted. You could.
That's so hard. I've loved Helm's Deep. I've loved Palinoras, like the big ones, but there's also some smaller ones I've loved. There's this great scenario where you have 5 ring races, you got to kill Dane. There's some great old school Harad scenarios versus Imrahil. In terms of the scenario I've enjoyed the most and had fun playing the most, it's going to be a weird one, but there's a scenario. I can't remember if it's San Ford or Flight of the Ring Race or something like that. It's one of the old Journey ones. And you literally have like 9 or 12 Dunedain, and you got to stop the ring race running past you and getting off the board. Yeah. That has been one of the funnest scenarios I've ever played. And I've played it so many times, and I've learnt so many strategies and tactics playing that very specific scenario. It had just so much in terms of what you learn with the game, resource management. So yeah, I would go. I think it's called San Ford. I think.
Okay.
But yeah, that scenario. I mean, that's such a hard one because there's so many other scenarios.
Favorite narrative scenario.
There's so many others that I'm just churning through my head at the moment. There's like Blue Mountain scenarios with Murin and Dra versus dragons. Like, oh my god, there's great ones where Aragorn revenge goes for the revenge kill on the troll that killed his dad. Yeah. Actually, the whole Arnold book was just phenomenal. Sorry, you got me on a weird tangent now because I'm thinking of all these scenarios that I've played in my life, and I'm just like, there's so many.
They're all coming back.
Actually, no, change my mind. Battle of Bywater. Battle of Bywater. Old school Battle of Bywater. That thing was amazing. I'm probably biased because Jeremy built a custom board for it, but that scenario is phenomenal.
That would improve the narrative engagement for the scenario for sure. Favorite matched play scenario? If you had to pick one?
I mean, Retrieval's pretty good. And so is
Retrieval? Bog.
Yeah, I actually quite like Retrieval in terms of how the game plays because you're halfway across the center line. But at the end of the day, it's been there since the OG original match play. It's domination. It may have changed its form over the years, but domination is the truest test of skill in this game, I think.
Dom's good. I like that. And it was in the previous edition. I'm not sure if it was previously, but it was the first scenario. And I think it is now still. It's number 1.
It is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. It's just always been a good scenario in every edition it's appeared in.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Favorite evening entertainment at an event?
I am partial to a good quiz.
Okay.
But at the end of the day,
a classic.
At the end of the day, I'm an Aussie at heart. It's just a good old fashioned piss up.
The drinking, yeah. Is there ever any karaoke involved in Aussie drinking?
Not really. Like a lot of our
such a letdown, Kylie.
We go to the pub, we have a feed, we drink a bit, we get an Uber back to the accommodation or to someone's house wherever we're staying, and we keep drinking. And then, it's highly probable that someone doesn't show up the next day because they've given themselves alcohol poisoning. And if I don't know what could explain Australian gaming culture more than that, I don't know what will. Because
but there's no microphones, there's no singing, there's no karaoke. I expected more from the Aussie drinking culture.
And having a yap with your mates. It's just drinking, having a yap with your mates, and at the end of the day,
drinking.
It's just a good time. It's just a good time.
Nice. But a quiz. You're partial to a quiz.
I'm partial to a quiz.
Good to hear. And finally, the age-old question. Dwarves or elves? Where do you fall on that fence?
Well, even though I'm playing dwarves at the moment, I have to go with my pointy-eared friends. It's just got some of the fun models in the game. Glorfindel, Elrond, her ladyship, Galadriel. I mean... Yeah, I have to go elves. As much as it pains me.
That's interesting. You just said that your the best model in the game is Leggy. our previous guest, Dave Farmer, said that the best model in the game at the moment is Glorfindel. So, two best models in the game. Glorfindel.
I would honestly say if I couldn't pick Leggy, it would be Glorfindel. But I think Leggy, for his points, cost value, like the whole analysis of Leggy and what he does, and the fact that the only CC you can put on him to actually do anything is spells, which good luck with an Elven Cloak and knocking him down, which good luck having the availability of that in your list. So,
yeah.
But I do have one last thing for you. Earlier in this episode, you asked me, who do I think is the
toughest games?
Toughest community I've had to deal with over the course of my foray into the international community.
That's how I know you're a podcast host, Kylie. You've circled back to
it's been knocking around that up here for a bit, and I'll admit I probably had more British players take games off me over the years. I've had to deal with a lot of the Polish players, and they've been hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Even the Americans and their stupid gun lines and their weird way of changing the entire engagement on a dime has been annoying. But, and I can't believe I'm saying this, the French have always been the hardest for me to overcome.
Damn, the French. Wow. So from Articon,
there's been quite a few French games where I have had to pull magic out of my ass to get across the line. And I think they get nerfed themselves. Like their community gets nerfed by going to other people's houses and having to play. So I think I have this gut feeling that if you were to go to the French house, you were to play in France, go to one of their major events, I think you're going to have a rough time.
So maybe we should be looking out for the French at the Nations Cup this year.
Maybe? Yeah, I would. If they've got all their powerhouse players going, I would have a go, have a look at the French, because I'm thinking of the 3 French games specifically in my head that I've had the privilege of playing, and all 3 have just been absolute nightmares. Like honestly, getting a little bit lucky to win. I know, like the last game of Articon last year, the only reason why I won that game was because the Mouth of Siren failed courage test after being broken. That was the only reason I won. Because he was going to keep the entire it was I know it's weird, but me specifically, I've always had trouble getting over the French, and I know our Australian team had trouble getting through the French as well. Weird choice, but the French.
Mainland Europe, there you go. So I think that's going to close us out. It's the end of the rapid fire segment. Thank you very much, Kylie, for joining me on Talk at the Table.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been fun.
Thank you very much for coming on and sharing some of that wisdom to the community, as you mentioned. So be sure, everyone, to go and check out the Green Dragon podcast. I'll link everything to do with them in the description down below. Please let us know if there's anything you'd like to see added to the format, any questions you want me to ask to these sorts of players as I continue to invite on more guests for this series. Please do let us know. But that is going to close us out. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching another episode of Talk of the Table from the Gollum's Gamers.